Welcome to my Hebrew channel, Melchizedek. I'm looking at an interesting phrase from Psalm 110, and it's known as after the order of Melchizedek. It's a very interesting reference here to the king of Salem. Abraham, of course, had a very interesting encounter with him because when Abraham had rescued his nephew Lot past Damascus, he returned and he left a tithe with Melchizedek, and it's at Salem. And the name is very interesting. It's the king of righteousness, and it's also interesting in that this king most certainly was not part of the tribe of the Levites. He wasn't even a Jewish person. He wasn't even from the descendant. It wasn't the descendant of Abraham, but he was most certainly recognized as a servant of Jehovah. So El Elyon. That's one of the first times we also see that reference to the God Most High. So and then Psalm 110 picks it up and goes and speaks about what the person who's been established or appointed according to the order of Melchizedek. And then into the book of Hebrews most certainly picks it up very strongly in reference to Jesus being appointed under the order of Melchizedek, according to what Melchizedek had established and what God had established with Melchizedek. We find that also in the book of Hebrews. So we have it here from Psalm 110, Al-Debarit Melchizedek, double segulate, of course. Here, segulates always usually carry a milel accenting towards the top. Accenting from this particular phrase here, Malche, king of, has been pushed over across the makef here, and then it's all falls on this one syllable over here, Sedek. Sedek. So Psalm 110 verses 4 and 5, Nishba Jehovah al velo necham. Okay, he has sworn, and that's Jehovah. Jehovah has sworn. It's to make an oath, and we find this in Beersheba. Okay, so this is a very well-known root here, Shin Bet Ayin. It's also number 7. 7 animals will be sacrificed to affirm this particular oath. So and we find Beersheba, and we find even Abimelech and others gathering together with Abraham to make these kinds of oaths. But here, Jehovah makes the oath. He makes this as a promise to himself. Okay? Ishba. Jehovah velo nicham, and he will not change his mind. His nacham is to stir the insides. Find it can be for good, for nichamayim, in other words, compassionate. But and I find it also in Genesis when Jehovah looks on the earth and he sees all the evil, and his insides are stirred, rum, and at that point they say, okay, well he something turned inside of him, and then he determined to destroy the earth. So, but here it says it's not. Okay, velo nicham. Okay, determined not to have his insides spin and not to destroy what's going on, or he will not be changing his mind here. The stirring of his insides doesn't change his mind at this point. Ata kohen leolam, you are priest forever. Okay, and al-kohen, ata, this is you, independent pronoun here, second person singular independent pronoun. Al-kohen, priest, leolam, forever. Al-dibarit, Melchizedek, according to the order of Melchizedek. Adonai al-yemanecha, the Lord is at your right hand. Mahatz, okay. Bayom efo, malachim, okay. He shatters, he mashes, okay. Mahatz, Bayom, in that day, afo, of his wrath. Off is literally the fire of the nostrils coming out. Okay, off it's his face or his nose or his nostrils become hot. Hum. Okay, the hum's not in here, but that's often included. By Yom Ha'afo, in the day of the heated nostrils, Malachim, he destroys. Then he mashes the kings in that day. There's a day of judgment that's coming. Okay, so all that's evil in the world will receive judgment from the person who represents the order of Melchizedek. Here's the Greek translation, and we're going to put this in here so that we can pick up on it later in Hebrews. Katatin taksin Melchizedek. Okay, there's a nice Greek version of what we have here in Hebrew. According to taxing, the taxology, by the way, this is probably the word for taxology in establishing plant orders and animal orders and so forth. So this is the order, okay, taxin. And then, yeah, taxonomy. Yeah, taxonomy comes from this word, and we have it here in Greek. Melchizedek. Yadin, he will judge. Okay, this is based on Dalet Nun, and we find it a judge literally is Dan. Okay, and then the tribe of Dan, that was the tribe that judges. Okay, the tribe that judges. Unfortunately, they didn't judge very well. So, Yadin. Okay, he judges Bagoyim in the days. Oh, Bagoyim in the nations, over the nations. Maleh, Gewot. Okay, filling up, heaping up. Geviot, the corpses, and this is these are actually quite similar roots here. Gimel vav, Gimel vav, Gimel vav yod, Gimel vav yod. This one's the masculine form of it, and when we see that, we have nations. When we see the feminine form of it, we have bodies, usually dead bodies. Okay, so and often. Bodies, parts of the body like yadayim and oznaim and so forth, they are feminine, and even in bodies, that's feminine. We find it givit, singular, when King David or David kills the lion. There's a corpse with the bees growing honey in it as a givit, and here we have gaviot. Find also the corpses of Saul when they were hung on the walls of Jabesh Gilead. That's used here as well. So we see it singular, plural. This is a plural. Geviot, corpses. Mahatz, he crushes. Okay, Rosh, the heads or the leaders. Al Aretz Rabbah, over the extensive world, over the entire world. Mahatz Rosh, Al Aretz Rabbah. This is, minach nahal, baderech yishteh, okay, from the brook, baderech, by the road, yishteh, he drinks, okay, he drinks, yishteh. And so he always has a good source of water if he's carrying out this kind of judgment on the nations. Alken, most certainly, and therefore, this also has a derivative sense, okay, Alken, Yarim, he exalts. Okay, this is Resh Mem. We see it in Avram and so forth. In verbal forms, lifting up, exalting, praising, bringing up, lifting, exalting. I use the word exalt here because it's the best sense of what's happening with this the head of the person who's bringing judgment. These are entirely different. This is a Rosh here and this is a Rosh, but this is the Rosh of the ones that are getting mashed, and this is the Rosh of the one who's doing it. So he will exalt his head, and that one receives then authority to carry forward the judgment of Jehovah. And we find the reference to Taksin Melchizedek al Devarit Malech Sadiq. We find that numerous times in Hebrews. Also, Christ did not exalt himself to be made a high priest. In other words, it was not of himself, but he was appointed by him who said to him, appointed by God, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." So reference here to Psalm 2, which very much establishment of power and appointment of Christ for judgment. And as he also says in another place, and the other place is Psalm 110, you are a priest forever. Okay? You are Kohen Leolam, after the order of Melchizedek, okay, al Devarit Melchizedek, okay, after the order, Kataten Taksin, according to taxonomy of Melchizedek, for the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 5:9 and 10, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation. Speaking here about Christ, to all who obey him, all who obey Christ. Being designated by God, okay, it's an appointment by God, a high priest, okay, this is Kohen, after the order of Melchizedek. Okay, this is Debarit Melchizedek, and that's an appointment that God gives to Jesus. So we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place of the curtain. Now, Jesus, who was from the tribe of Judah, by his descendancy or by his tribal relationship, did not have a right to go into this inner temple, but as one appointed by God, he most certainly did. In fact, the curtain was torn in half so that there'd be an open pathway from the people towards the inner sanctuary. And Jesus has gone as a forerunner in our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So in other words, this is a big deal, and it's not because of descendants, not because of his tribal affiliation. It was because of the appointment of God to open the way from us to the inner sanctuary of God, and Jesus is the one that does that for us. This becomes even more evident, so it keeps on explaining it. When another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek, this other priest here is Jesus, who has become a priest, okay? In other words, the priesthood of Christ is something that God has appointed on him, not on the basis of legal requirements. He was not descendant of Aaron. He was not descendant of the Levites, according to bodily descent, but by the power of an indestructible life. That's what brought this on. He lived a perfect life, and with that, he has the right to go into the inner sanctuary, bring our prayers before Jehovah, and that's his role. And we can look to Jesus most certainly to affirm the strength of our praise. And that's why we will say, in the name of Jesus when we are praying, because Jesus most certainly affirms those prayers before the throne of God. For it is witnessed of him, Arthurios, that you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Beautiful connection here. Melchizedek begins as a king of Salem, has a special role because God has given that special role. Psalm 110 affirms the order of Melchizedek, and then that order of Melchizedek is explained very clearly here in the book of Hebrews, and it's something that Christ does for us. And it's most certainly we can be encouraged by the work of Jesus on our behalf as our high priest, and he's a priest that represents us before the throne of God. We can live a life of joy and happiness, understanding this and living it according to his will, and we're grateful for that. So God bless, and may you continue to live according to the benefits that we receive from Jesus, because he is most certainly of the order of Melchizedek. Until the next time.